Good morning to all. Bonjour Marseille, and greetings to all of you who are watching us from Africa, from Europe, and from Marseille. I'm Gilles Crier-Gorig, the COO for Emerging Valley, and I'm very glad to welcome you all on this promising panel on African EdTech in the post-COVID era, challenges, constraints, and opportunities for the future of education on the continent. So 2 years ago, to most of you in our audience, EdTech did not really mean a thing. But then COVID happened, and all of a sudden, the life turned a new life entirely, with meetings online, with children's school online, and even with social gatherings online. If the digital transformation has been at the top of the agenda for global years now, the global pandemic clearly acted as a catalyzer, fast-tracking the need for change within companies, institutions, and society as a whole. Many startups have been benefiting from the trend, with online education contents at large, like the startup Almentor in Egypt, coding trainings with M. Jangal from Senegal, or tutor booking platforms with the likes of Tutoria in Nigeria. Public actors were also prompt to react, with libraries getting digitalized and free access given to online knowledge banks. This trend is slowly getting visible in the VC figures for the continent, with 39 million USD raised by EdTech startups in 2020, according to Partech Africa. Nevertheless, the amount still only stands for 3% of the global amount raised by the startups in the continent, and is also insufficient to cover the rising needs. How do we make EdTech the next Fintech? How do we overcome structural constraints with the digital divide affecting many rural areas that are deprived of the required connectivity standards? What models do we want to promote? And are teachers a thing of the past? Many complex questions that will be addressed today by our experts. And with no further ado, the floor is yours. So I will start with the first introductory round, starting with you, Abdoulaye Ouribari. First, as a spoiler, our audience needs to know that you actually studied in Marseille, but can you maybe introduce yourself and present your work and projects in your day-to-day occupation as an F ambassador?
Okay, thank you for this invitation. For the presentation, I am Abdoulaye Bari. I am a consultant in pharmaceutical industry, and I am a teacher and a researcher at University of Conakry. Also, I am a president and a founder of a no-profit organization, Technotrans Guinea, and I am ambassador NEF in Guinea. Donc, about activities, as a consultant, I advise the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industry on the production of their product, drug or vaccine. About teacher, I teach cell biology and at the Faculty of Medicine and cytogenetics at the Faculty of Science of Conakry University. About a no-profit organization, Technotrans Guinea, we are involved in the transfer of knowledge and technology in Africa. About my activity as ambassador, I contribute to capacity building in education, research. We are currently working on the creation of technology platform to support educational and research institution in Africa.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdoulaye. Turning now to Choma Chukwu, who is the founder of Stinches Project and NEF Ambassador to Nigeria. Could you introduce yourself and your work to our audience?
Hey, my name is Choma. I'm a software developer. I work at Tafawa Balewa University at the Directorate of ICT. I'm also the founder of the STEM Test project, which is actually the Learn by Building under Learn by Building Foundation. Currently, we have two projects running, which is the STEM Test project and the SheTax project. The STEM Test project seeks to engage students with hands-on or practical learning and teach them how to transform their skills to community solutions. That's the goal of the STEM Test project. The SheTax project is for young girls between the ages of 13 to 22, where they gain tech skills from software development to embedded systems. And we've run over, it also learns soft skills, design thinking, branding, pitching, and at the end of every training, they bring out, they create a solution, they build something, name it, pitch it to an audience. And so that's what that's my activity currently. As a professional, I'm a developer, mostly in web dev and mobile development. Recently, also, I went into gaming because I see a future of gaming in education, gaming for education. Yeah, so recently did a course on that. Still a bit new in that, but I'm really into it now. Currently moving gradually. So that's it. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Choma. So same question to you, Dr. Abdeslam Badre. You an associate professor at Mohammed V University of Rabat and also an F Fellows. So tell us a bit more about yourself.
Thank you very much, Julie, and good afternoon, everyone. Very delighted to join you all on the Emerging Valley Summit on its fifth edition. Very delighted to be among the participants and speakers. My name is Abdeslam Badr. I'm originally from Morocco, associate professor at Mohammed V University, as you just mentioned, an international expert on policy development and higher education leadership, planning and policy developing, and also an alumnus of an NEF and also ambassador, both the NEF and the fellow and the ambassador of the NEF in its version 2016-2018. And as as a professor, I teach at Mohammed V University, both graduate and undergraduate students. But as an expert of policy development, I work with various international organizations, mainly within the European Union, such as Euromed France, since we are in France, or the event is taking place this year in Marseille. So yeah, Euromed France and Majalat, Erasmus Plus, GRC in Belgium, UNESCO, GYA in Germany, where I'm also based, and many other organizations. And my focus recently for the last couple of years is the focus on digitalization and e-leadership within higher educational institutions. The idea of e-leadership, since we are talking about digitalization, so I think we know the debate is no more focusing on leadership in its traditional form, but more on the electronic form of leadership, especially as it has been catalyzed with the COVID-19 pandemic. So yeah, basically this is briefly on what I do, both as an academic and also as a professional within the landscape of policy development.
Thank you very much, Doctor. So we are now closing this introductory round with Momar Dieng, Head of Strategy at IAMS. Momar, could you maybe present IAMS and also yourself, please? Please unmute yourself.
Yes,
Momar?
thank you very much. And thank you for this opportunity to be part of the Emerging Valley Forum. It's a great pleasure to be part of this fifth edition as well. I am the Chief of Strategy and Partnerships at the African Institute of Mathematical Sciences. I am a mathematician by training, and I've also had different hats in previous lives. So before coming to AIMS and leading strategy and partnerships, I was the chief technical advisor to the Minister of Education in Senegal, where I led one of the main digitization initiatives, which had to do with introducing technology in classrooms and throughout the education systems in Senegal. And this was pre-COVID. We did not know that COVID would hit, and we kind of had the fortune to foresee some of the things that would be needed before. I'm also still teaching mathematics around the world, primarily at the Kennedy School of Government, where I lecture in the master's program in public administration. And I will also take the opportunity to say just a few words about AIMS. For those of you who don't know about it, AIMS is really the premier STEM research and training institution on the continent. We have 5 centers all around the continent, located in Senegal, Cameroon, Ghana, Rwanda, and South Africa, where we train master's students in mathematical sciences broadly defined. So we have programs in artificial intelligence, in data science, in climate science, and we're about to launch a program in epidemiology, and so on and so forth. But we also do a lot of public engagement and outreach to policymakers and the general public about the importance of funding and engaging in science, technology, and mathematics. One of our most successful platforms for that is actually the Next Einstein Forum, which many of you may have heard of. And in fact, that's why we have these NEF ambassadors also here, which are part of this process. And the third pillar, or one of the third core groups of activities that AIMS engages in is teacher training, because we realize that it's not enough to just wait until the master's level and recruit the most talented students in order to give them the kind of training that they would otherwise have to leave the continent for. But we also have to help our partner governments across the continent with the pipeline. And that's where the teacher training comes in, to strengthen and build the capacity of math and science teachers across the continent, so that, as the motto of our organization says, we make sure that the next Einstein is African. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Momar, with this very positive motto. So now that our audience knows a bit more your backgrounds and where you are speaking from, let's enter in the heart of the debate and try to establish a sort of state of play of EdTech today in Africa. I will start with you, Dr. Abdeslam Badre. What are we talking about when we are speaking about EdTech today? And could you maybe try to establish a quick panorama for our audience, and maybe present some iconic solutions and concepts so that we don't get lost on the way? If you can please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Julie, for the question. So, just briefly, maybe one of the things to highlight here is just the slight differentiation between the EdTech and then educational technology, because there is within the industry there is a clear difference between the two, but maybe in general, when we refer to educational technology, or when we talk about EdTech, some people might think that we're talking about the same thing. So educational technology is the combined not only logistics and resources, but also strategies and technologies and approaches of both traditional and electronic teaching in order to facilitate learning and educational intake in general. So this is educational technology, but EdTech, it goes beyond, and this is maybe the center of our debate today, is the state of EdTech within African context. So the EdTech is not only the combined approaches and material and then theories of facilitating learning, but it's the whole industry that is involved in generating, producing, and then theorizing educational approaches and then gadgetries in order to facilitate not only learning, but also maybe to revolutionize learning and take it from its traditional context. So here we're talking about companies that contribute in developing new solutions, new services, and also new products to accompany pedagogues, educationalists, and administrators working within the field of education, be that higher education or elementary education. So this is basically what we mean by EdTech. So EdTech, it's like whole industry. It's a new industry coming on the rise. Maybe within Africa, there is fluctuation in the development of this sector in comparison to the UK or the United States, the two places where wherein like EdTech is like taking the lead. But in general, EdTech is a term which combines between two elements, information technology and information communication technologies, and then educational pedagogy.
Thank you very much for this clarification, Abdeslam. I think that we really understand here that we're talking about a whole industry. So going back to Momar Dieng, could you maybe give us some figures about this sector, now that we have a bit defined the terms, the figures in terms of revenue, in the audience, maybe the value added and performance rates, and maybe more globally, can we measure the EdTech phenomenon in Africa as of today?
Thank you very much, Julie. So I will preface what I'm going to say by saying that, in fact, one of the things, in fact, that in EdTech in Africa that is really not well understood is its real impact. For instance, the EdTech Hub, which is, I believe, an initiative of the UK government and its International Development Agency, formerly known as DFID, tried to do a survey of EdTech companies in Africa. And they came up with a listing of about 168 companies that were active on the African continent. And most of them were active in some of the big markets, right? Which is not a surprise. So you have South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya that are really leading the way in terms of the percentage of users and also just the reach of the companies. And so within those, within that market, the products that were surveyed had a total combined user base of about 19 million users, which combines children aged 14 or younger in all of those, children, adults and children. And what I was going to say is that in those countries, you have about 450 million children aged 14 or younger. So if you compare 19 million users as per the survey, which is acknowledged by the institution as incomplete, but still that's the best data we have. 19 million is still a very small number compared to the user base that we could expect for the potential of the African continent, which is 450 million children aged 14 and younger. So that gives you an idea of the room that there is still to cover in terms of reach. And I have to stress that even within those 19 million users that were surveyed by this study, 17 million of them still use EdTech in a very low-tech way. So many of them were users of a TV program, which I will not name just because I don't want to promote any specific company or product, but this was a company that mostly was promoting TV shows and made up for about 17 million of those 19 million users. And so you see that there is still a lot of room for improvement, and numbers in terms of course, market share and the reach in terms of user base or how much those users are spending on technology is still very hard to come by. There are very scattered statistics here and there, but this is one of the areas, in fact, where a lot of work needs to be done to understand really how users, how much users are willing to invest in these technologies. And one of the challenges, of course, is that the channels through which people access EdTech are still very much tied to telecom companies, right? So when we speak of EdTech, and we'll talk about it probably with our colleagues in the next few points, it's very rare that users in Africa will pay for an EdTech solution directly to the company. What is more common is that they will access those resources through other channels, namely the bundles, for instance, that telecom operators avail to them, and things like that, which makes it even harder to put really a price tag in terms of market share on these technologies.
Thank you very much, Momar. So we can see that there's a huge untapped potential yet. So maybe to tackle one of the bigger constraints that is affecting the market, I would like to ask Chioma, the next question. In regards with the pandemics and the last 2 years, what we've just been through, would you say that the digital and EdTech tools are actually bridging the gap between rural education and people in the cities, or on the contrary, that they are emphasizing inequities? Can you unmute yourself? Sorry, Chioma. Oh. I think we might have lost Chioma. Okay, so I'll come back to Chioma when she's back online.
Sorry, I lost. Okay, so yes, in some sense, there was a little breach to some extent, but it's still very, very low. We in most public schools.
Sorry, Chioma, we cannot hear you. I think the connection issues that we're just talking right now are our problem. Sorry, we'll try again just for the next round. So I'm switching to you, Abdoulaye, for this last question. We know that most to speak about connections issues, we know that most of the EdTech solutions require a strong connection and possession of digital equipment. How can we overcome this challenge? And what would you say are the constraints to a massive development on EdTech on the continent?
Okay, thank you for your question. So we can see the example with this connection in Africa. Sometimes it's true that most African countries are faced with a strong connection problem and a lack of digital equipment. But this can be overcome with a strong involvement of the government of African country by releasing the necessary funds to give access to the necessary connection to perform of educational technology. This must be a priority for massive development of EdTech. To this must be added the involvement of qualified human resource, and this stage, the African diaspora must be strongly involved to support initiative in African country. All of these elements can contribute to a massive development of EdTech in Africa. For example, in Guinea, I have an appointment with a minister of higher education, scientific research and innovation of Guinea to discuss about EdTech in Guinea.
Thank you very much, Abdullah. So maybe we're going to try again with Chioma, if your connection maybe is better. So regarding this digital gap between urban and rural education.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So not much was done in rural areas. Yes, in urban areas, the EdTech startups really boosted in schools, mostly private schools. For government schools, very little was done. I know in some cities, TV programs was run, but not everyone was even aware. Maybe once or twice in a week for a particular class. Maybe for primary three, it's Wednesday. For primary one, it's Monday. That's for a state initiative. In rural areas, very little was done, and I know of also some schools try to use WhatsApp to do to reach out, but that's really on the poor level. Okay, of course, startups. So I know a startup that tried to use AI, WhatsApp AI, to respond to students' needs, but the numbers are really low, very low. In fact, very few people know about this. And so in rural areas, they were really cut off. Okay, I know radio. Yes, radio. I think 60%. Radio reached out to 60% of students this is Nigeria right now. The numbers in Nigeria, and so most of us, the rest was mobile phones, and but still very low. I think the percentage is about 3% of students in primary and secondary schools, and yes, in tertiary institutions, we had a private tertiary institution do a lot of work. Maybe a very 1% of government schools, and the rest did little or nothing for as in tertiary institutions during the pandemic period. So there's still a lot to be done. Most of the issues has to do with access, infrastructure, and okay, yes, accent. That's one of the major things. Internet and having the tools to learn with. Yeah.
Very thanks, Chioma. So we see maybe an increase in equities between public and private systems. So with all those first cons that drawn, we're going to switch to the last part of our panel. Time is closing quickly on us as we are heading to this part. So I will ask you, each of you, to be very concise in your answers and to keep to 2 minute sharp answers. So for this last part, I'd like to take some step backs, maybe, and try to play a little prospective exercise. So ladies first, and we'll keep with you, Chioma, while your connection is okay. How do you see
Okay.
the future of tech on the continent? And according to you, what will make the trends in that tech in 2022 and maybe beyond?
Okay. Okay. There's so much opportunities. Like I said, we have lack infrastructure, but I think advocacy and policies will play a key role in getting government to get to do things. This is very important. I've seen it work over several things that change over the years. We need to push, especially for stakeholders in the education sector, need to push for policies that will enable people be empowered enough to gain skills, gain access to internet or tools or learning platforms that they can use for to learn. And of course, the market is large. Even though the countries like Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya has the numbers, the funding is still very low compared to other funding like fintech. So we need to. There's so much market. There's so much scrap. The surface is still on the surface. So much to do. So I think there's opportunity for advocacy. There's opportunity for startups to create solutions that are low that require maybe low data, low don't quite so I'm trying to explain. I don't know how to. Okay, let me put it this way: we need to. There's so much to do with our access opportunity. The market is large, so I think if startups, entrepreneurs, non-profits have a lot of role to play. I believe there are funding that can be accessed to push for access, push for infrastructure first. Then I think we can now push for policies that will favor it for startups and entrepreneurs to do something. And I also think later in the future, maybe not now, we cannot get into things like gaming, VR, things that are more quality. But I think we can start from the low access, because even without EdTech, we have the number of children out of school without even the coronavirus is still high in Africa. So we need to still, there's so much to be done. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Chuma. So start low and start simple. Got it.
Yeah.
Then turning to Momar, with maybe quite a polemical question. From classrooms to books, everything is getting digitalized nowadays. So would you say that teachers are a thing from the past? And how do we find the right balance between physical and digital?
Thank you very much, Julie. Absolutely not. Teachers are not a thing of the past. And I do think that we have hit a point of no return when it comes to remote learning, in the same way as we have hit a point of no return when it comes to working from home. So uh, teaching and learning will never be the same again after COVID. But really, I have to stress the importance of instructional design in EdTech. That's one of the most underrated parts of the process of EdTech, because EdTech is a process. It's not just about buying stuff, buying computers, getting connectivity in. If you don't get the instructional design right first, all the technology will do is just speed up the rate of failure. So it's the responsibility of educators to employ a pedagogy first, technology second approach, right? Technology is just a tool. If the goal is to support or enhance learning, it has to be pedagogy first and technology second. And so often the cart is put before the horse, so to speak, and all the stuff is purchased, and we focus on that as opposed to the overall goal and structure of what is it that we are trying to teach, how we assess it. Assessment is a key part, and how we plan the courses. I've been forced to teach with technology in the past 2 years as well. And I will tell you, one of the hardest part is just figuring out how to make sure that these tools like Zoom and the breakout rooms, for instance, can be properly and effectively included in lessons, right? So thinking about the role of that tech plays in instruction, what the teacher does, at what point, how learning happens, and at what point what the student needs to do is going to be a very important thing, and we cannot take teachers out of the equation. Who is using the technology? When it's all said and done, it is what the student does with the tool in pursuit of learning that ultimately matters. And I will end with one last point, which is that the real power of EdTech, which is still very much underused, is the analytics that's behind. Often people just give the tools to schools or to governments or to families, and we don't realize that one of the real powers that's underused is just this data mining and data science behind to actually improve assessment and improve the learning process. And we have to, for that to actually be effective, we also need teachers to tell us what to measure when and what it means, right? That's not stuff for just engineers and data scientists. That requires a real deep knowledge in instructional theory and pedagogy. And I think that's where I see the future of all of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Momar. So we're going to remember this, pedagogy first and technology second. For the next question, I'd like to tackle the role of public sector with Dr. Abdeslam Badre. So to your opinion, what should be the role of public actors, and should we take a specific approach in our debate when we talk about maybe primary and secondary education?
Well, thank you very much, Julie. Before I answer this question, which is very pertinent, let me just add few things to the question you asked regarding the future of EdTech within African context. I think data available hint at a very promising sector within Africa. When we look at three indicator data, we look at the economic data, we look at demographic data, and then we look at the territorial or urbanization data. You know that Africa is like fastly urbanized continent, and then there is a huge shift from a rural area into like more urbanized continent within different countries within the African continent. What does that mean? It means that the working class, which represents the dynamo of the economy, since the working class is the class that spends so much then it saves, and most of the spending of working class families, which is about 30 to 35%, goes to the education of their children. So like with urbanization, the working class family, or like the working class in general within African continent, is going to expand, which will put high demand on EdTech and education in general. So this is one thing. The other factor is the demographic development within Africa. With the data from UNESCO says that like by 2050, Africa will have 2 billion population. And what does that mean? It means like the 10 to 11 million young people who get into the job market today will double into almost 20 million people, and these 20 million people will have to be equipped with soft skills and then new digital skills, and that will also put a lot of demand on EdTech. And then the third factor is the economic development within Africa, which is like really very fast growing, and the GPD within African nations will triple from 240 billion to almost $7 billion annually. And that, what does that mean? It means like the 1% which is now being invested on EdTech within the African continent will skyrocket to up to 10% in some countries, but the average is going to be 6% annually. So these three indicators highlight that EdTech is going to be a huge sector for investment, but also for forging educational profile within the African continent. And then when we talk about how any country to like fully benefit from the outcomes of EdTech, we're usually talking about four conditions: accessibility, affordability, affordability, and then availability and acceptability. Within the African continent, so far we have only two conditions which are being fully fledged or like met, and that's mainly acceptability. The African continent and African culture and African family is now in harmony with accepting technology as a means of educating their children. And then we have also like information technology and gadgetaries. They are available. What we are most of African nations still striving with is affordability and then accessibility to those platforms and then gadgetaries. And this is the role of the government. Now, coming to your question, what role can the private sector play within this equation? I think it goes back to the idea of policies. Government, in order to make the sector more attractive and then make the private sector more willing to invest in this, I think policies need to be leveraged and then adapted and harmonized and made really accessible and also simplified for both local and then external or like international investors. Because I think at some in some contexts or like in some nations, the policies of investment are too complicated, and sometimes they are even excluding like for private sectors and investors, especially coming from outside of the continent. They find the snags within the system like very discouraging to invest within the continent. So I think in order to attract more private sector, which can play a very important role in this sector, I think policymakers, government should really simplify policies and make them more attractive and luring, so that because by the end of the day, I think only the private sector who can really leapfrog the establishment of this sector in the continent, given the skills and then the logistics they have that most of our government don't have. Sorry for speaking too much.
Very passionate speech. Thank you, Abdeslam. It was really interesting. Eventually, to close this panel with the central position of universities, I want to ask Dr. Abdoulaye Goribari, what is the positioning of African universities today? Have they embarked the revolution yet, or are they lagging behind? And what does that mean for the future?
Thank you, Julie, for your question. Since not all African countries are at the same level in EdTech, the answer to the question will depend on which country you take as an example. In Egypt, for example, the Minister of Education has given free access to the online knowledge. To my knowledge, this is not the case in many other countries, in many other African countries, such as Guinea. Donc, from January onwards, we are planning to organize video conference seminars in several universities in Guinea. What is positive is that all universities are aware of the need to use EdTech. Yes, we can say that many universities are lagging behind, but with a good awareness and gathering the necessary research, hope is allowed for the future of African in terms of educational technology.
Thank you very much, Abdoulaye. So we're unfortunately running out of time. So thank you very much to all of you for your very insightful and passionate answers. To do a small wrap up, because I really want to make some points that you all mentioned for this debate. I will return that EdTech is a whole industry. Its impact is still quietly untapped on the continent with 19 million users so far, and that the leading countries are the usual suspects with Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa. Also, that connectivity should be a massive priority for development if we want to reach this potential, and also implicate the diaspora. And in terms of recommendations, what you've all mentioned would be to start with low access, start simple, to be efficient. But definitely we reach a point of no return with COVID. But we still need teachers. I'm glad for these answers, with pedagogy first, and only second is the technology. And also that maybe public sectors should make that policy more simple in order to attract more investors. And finally, that universities have to get on the trend. So I hope I make it all clear from what you said. Thanks a lot. It was really rich, and I think our audience learned many things today. Thanks again, and we'll all meet you on the summit at Emerging Valley today. Please stay connected to answer the questions that I'm sure will flow from our audience online and in physical. Thanks again, and see you soon.